Hello, Purdue fans, and welcome to another episode of Boiler Banter. I am your host, Brandon Brown, joined as always by the expert Dustin Schutte. And maybe we're approaching back to expert status a little bit, Dustin. We thought that Purdue had to get off the schneid a little bit there, get a win. UCLA was coming to town. We talked about UCLA's struggles coming east. And that played out. Purdue ends up getting a 10-point win. They're back in the win column. Let's just start there with the game first. Like, is this a relief? I mean, it was kind of expected. Like, how's the psyche of this Purdue team now after getting a win after losing 4 in a row, which was uncharted waters for sure this year?
Yeah, I think this was a big win for their mental psyche. I think moving forward after losing those 4 games and the way they had kind of lost them, as we had talked about, this was a team that they had in 2 games, they had double-digit leads, and then the other 2, they had, a 7 and a 9-point lead, right? Mm-hmm. So this was a team that got up to good starts and then couldn't close the first half or struggled out of the gate of the second half. They had a 12-point lead on the road against Indiana, and everything looked like it was going well, and then just kind of a meltdown. And what I think was really positive was, obviously, if you're Purdue, you want to come out of the gate and just do what you did to Nebraska, do what you did to Michigan, where you just – put your foot on the gas from the opening tip-off and you just kind of cruise the rest of the game. But they got out to a 10-point lead early in that game against UCLA. The Bruins make it a 2-point game at halftime, and early in the second half, they take the lead. UCLA takes the lead. And so it's just like you could almost feel like Mackey Arena, which is one of the most raucous arenas you'll ever be in. People were kind of like sitting on their hands. Like there was a lot of nervous energy in that building because it felt like, here we go again. Like we got off to a really good start and then we're just going to let it slip away. But they were able to kind of rally. There was a really pivotal moment. Purdue had a 3-point lead. I think it was 56-53 or 59-56, something around there. It was 59-56. And Trey Kaufman ran with about 6.5 minutes, and Tyler Bilodeau were kind of like sizing each other up on an inbounds play. It was a really important possession. The official walks over and kind of like separates them a little bit before the inbounds, and he takes a little bit longer. It was probably 15-20 seconds. And Trey Kaufman ran, which I've never seen him do this before. He kind of gestures to the crowd, like get up, get make some noise. The entire crowd gets on its feet. Purdue gets a stop. He goes down, gets a bucket. It's a 5-point game. And that kind of fueled a 12-0 run. And just like that, the game was over. Purdue, it almost felt like one of those moments where if Purdue goes on the run to close out this season, maybe in the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, I feel like that moment is the one you would point to and say, this is where Purdue got its mental toughness back. Because to that point, they really hadn't been able to stop UCLA. They really hadn't been able to put them away. And for Trey Kaufman-Rent to show a little bit of emotion, get the fans, like get that nervous energy out of the building. We need you right now. I just thought that was probably the most pivotal point in that game. And I think having the 5 days to prepare and rest and get off their feet a little bit was helpful. I think the fact that it was a home game, as you mentioned, Brandon, UCLA has struggled. I think they've won just one game. Funny enough, it was at Indiana where they've won in the Eastern time zone on the road. So this was a really big win for Purdue, and UCLA is a quality team. That's a really good defensive team, and Purdue had to gut one out. And I think, again, the fact that it was kind of the same circumstances we saw those other 4 games. Great start, let it slip away. The fact that they were able to finally overcome that and get a win, I think does a lot for this team's mental toughness and their psyche moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned UCLA being a good team. I mean, they're now sitting at 20-9, just like Purdue is.
Yeah.
They're in the Big Ten, whatever the hell that. I mean, that's so weird. Their games are probably tipping at 10, 11 o'clock Eastern time, like when they're
right.
at home, and that's just bizarre. But that is a quality team, and they've been playing better in the second half of the season. I want to talk about a couple players first, a couple players before we move on. We'll talk about Trey Kaufman-Rent a little bit. This is a little bit of a question from my own bank. This is just something I want you to expand on a little bit. You've got a guy here. He dropped in 29 points, 11 of 15. I mean, that's as efficient as you can get in a game like this. I mean, he's 6'9". That's not small, but it's not like he's 7'2". He's 230. He's not a play above the rim, fly around the gym kind of like. how is this dude so good? Like, I've watched him a handful of times now this year, and it's just like he just like, and I'll probably steal your answer a little bit of what I've noticed, but he just seems to like get wherever he wants to go, angles, layups, easy, but like he just makes it look really easy. How do you drop in 29, going 11 to 15, and he seems to do this like every single game just about?
This is the crazy thing too about it, Brandon. It's like you look up at the scoreboard and you're like, oh, he's got 15. Oh, he's got 23. Like you don't even really expect it. It's almost like and there are
shoots no threes in today's game, which is crazy. No threes. It's wild.
Doesn't dunk really unless there's nobody around him. Like he's not posterizing people.
Sure.
Like he's not the flashiest people. He's so good and his footwork is tremendous. Now, sometimes he does slip up and he will travel occasionally if he gets moving too fast. Sometimes he'll rush his shot. And Matt Painter's kind of talked about this. Like when he gets the ball at the nail, or if he gets that on that elbow, his ability to drive to the basket or make good decisions. The other thing that makes him so good and that he's underrated with, he's averaging like 2.5 assists per game. He's a really good passer. So teams have to account for that. And if you try to go one-on-one with him, like he can just spin move you and go to either hand. So like he doesn't, if there's a weakness in its game, he's just not like a pure jump shooter. Like he's almost got that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It's not a hook shot, but it's like a jump hook. And
like a push shot. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great, because it does sometimes look like, especially if he's taking contact, it does almost look like he's shot putting it up towards the basket. But he is just so crafty. I think that's the best word. I think he's just a very crafty player. He's not really a jump shooter. He will every once in a while, but it's not very frequent. He's perfected that jump hook. And so he's just one of those players. And I think the other fascinating thing is about his game is I talk about sometimes it seems like it's like if you can say this, a quiet 25 points, a quiet
right.
20 points, right? But there's stretches in the game where he'll go and he will be the only player to score. He'll score 8 straight points. He'll score 10 straight points. And then he may not get, he'll get the ball every time down the court, but he may not, when they're going to double team him, he's going to kick it out and he's going to find Braden Smith. He's going to find Fletcher Lawyer, Miles Colvin, Cam Heide, whoever it might be. And so I think that's why sometimes it seems like maybe he doesn't have a lot. It's just because he goes on those stretches where it's 8 straight points, where it's 6 straight points, or whatever the case might be. But yeah, he's just his development. And I told people this too, like when he was I don't know if it was when he was a redshirt freshman or just a freshman barely playing, but Matt Painter said this kid's going to be an all Big Ten player. And I think he's proving that now. There were some people who kind of fought that and like, I don't know if he's that good. He's a skilled player, but like this dude is without question all Big Ten. Now, I don't know if he's going to be first team, second team. He'll be an all Big Ten player, but he's been incredible. And I think the other thing now that you're starting to see is he was the one that called the players only meeting when Purdue went through that 4-game losing streak. He was the one that basically said, look, I trust all of you guys. Okay. Like I need you to believe in yourself because I trust you. And so not only is he a major factor on the floor, he's now kind of grown into this leadership role where he's taking the responsibility and ownership and saying, hey, I'm one of the 3 guys, one of the 3 leaders on this team. I have to be better and I got to help out these young guys. Cause if I do that, we're going to be better as a team. So he's really developed and improved all aspects of his game from like a mental standpoint to a skill standpoint.
It's like you said. I mean, a quiet 25, I guess, if that's possible. But
right.
It literally may be an entire game with no dunks, no threes, not even jumpers. It's just little, like I said, little bunnies at the rim. Crafty angle type of plays, like you said, that little hook shot, little baby hook, little push shots. It's just if he's on your team, you love him. If you play against him, you're like, that stinking guy. He just does every time down. He just gets a bucket. Like, is anybody going to check this guy? And I could be wrong. Again, I haven't watched every single game of him this year, but he's coming back, right? He's not like an early entry guy. He's like the perfect college player, right? He's going to come back and probably be here again next year and do the same kinds of things and be even better at what he does. Like that, he just kind of fits that bill of a Purdue lifer, and they seem to always have a couple of those dudes.
Yeah, I'd assume so. I haven't heard like a
He's
lot of
been
draft.
really productive. It's hard to say, but
Yeah.
because he doesn't play above the rim, because he doesn't have an 8-foot
Right.
wingspan, because he's not 7 feet tall, you just kind of think it could be tough for him at the next level. It could be.
Yeah, it could be. And I'll admit I don't follow a lot of draft boards, so I don't know if he's even in the conversation, but my guess is Purdue's basketball NIL, from my understanding, is in pretty good shape. And so I would assume, like, if you're not going to be a first-round pick, I would assume it would be beneficial to come back. Now, I assume what a lot of Purdue guys will do is a lot of them will test the draft waters. You know, you can do that now with the NBA. And so I'm guessing he'll get some sort of grade. And if he likes what he hears, he may stick in the draft. If he doesn't, he may come back to Purdue. I would assume, like you said, Brandon, if Zach Edey, who was the National Player of the Year after his junior season, decided to come back, I got to assume Trey Kaufman-Renn did, because I think he's, especially on the defensive end, like, he's a good defender, but I don't know if he's an NBA level defender, at least right now. That's not to say he can't get to that point. I'll be shocked if he doesn't come back, but sometimes you just never know with these things. He may go to the combine, get a great review, and say, you know what, this is going to be the best for my future. But I'm assuming that, yes, all three of Purdue, just a nightmare for other teams, right? Like, their three best players, Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn, I would assume are all going to be back next season.
Yeah, you would think so. Speaking of Braden Smith, look, man, here's a guy after my own heart. I think I was about 5'11", $170 when I played ball in high school. That's where he's 6 foot, 175 pounds right now. I also wore the number 3. Thank you very much. And so does Braden Smith. I can't grow a beard like him, but I see, this is a ridiculous thing to say, I see a little bit of me in him. I'll say it, whatever. Anyway, the dude's a stud. He's so unassuming, and then you just watch him play. He's got like this shifty, he just kind of, I don't know, he's certainly not the best athlete on the floor any night he plays, but he can knock down shots from everywhere. He just knows how to get to the basket. He's played a lot of really big minutes, and he's also pretty good at dishing the ball out. He dropped 8 assists in this game against UCLA, and that is relevant because
he's now Purdue's all-time leading assist man. Did it in less than 3 seasons.
That's
which
pretty impressive.
Is really impressive, yeah. For him to have, I think it's now 696, so he'll have more than 700 by the time his junior season comes to an end. So he's got a chance to hit 1,000 assists. So that would be a pretty special club to join there. But yeah, he's just been sensational this season. And what is always interesting to me is he's such a pass-first point guard, and get my teammates involved, set them up for success, get them open shots, that earlier this season, they have had to, and even throughout the season, they've had to urge him to shoot the basketball. It's not like he's a bad shooter. Like, that guy can score at the rim. He can knock down triples. He's got some range on him.
Made 6 threes in this game. Went 6 for 10 from 3-point land. I mean, yeah, he's knocking it. I feel like he's the guy that you watch. There's a handful of guys like this in college every year. Lots of them scattered across the Big Ten. Every time they shoot, you just kind of think it's going in. He's one of those dudes. Like, if he's got some space, it's going in. That's how I feel about him.
Yeah, you just assume that he's going to knock it down. And so it's always funny to me when they talk about, like, we have to push him to shoot. Like, it's like, this kid's a great shooter. I remember he shot 21 times. I can't remember which game it was now, but he took 21 shot attempts, and he said he felt bad. Like, I don't want to shoot that much. He ended up with like 34 points in that game. But so, that's just his mindset. He's been very pass first. And I think the interesting thing is, a lot of people, when Zach Edey left, were like, Braden Smith, that's how he got all of his assists. That's why he was such a good passer, when you got the most dominant big man. Well, now he's getting he's distributed to everybody. It's not as, yes, Zach Edey accounted for a large percentage of those, but it wasn't like 50% of his assists. It was maybe like, I can't remember the number, but like 35 or something. And then you've got Fletcher. Now you got Trey Kaufman-Renn. Like I said, he's had a lot of different players to distribute the ball to. And it's just a really impressive feat for him. Again, he's got another season, so he's going to shatter that record. And to that point, like when I mentioned Zach Edey too, I think what I need people to understand, if you're a Purdue fan, is that the expectations have been raised, but also, like, you can't take players like Zach Edey and Braden Smith for granted. Like, you may never see as dominant of a player as Zach Edey for another 30 or 40 years. It hadn't been since Ralph Sampson played that we had seen a player like him. And the same thing goes with Braden Smith. I mean, he may go down, he probably will go down as the greatest point guard in Purdue history. And so we've seen Zach Edey last year break Joe Barry Carroll's rebound record, Rick Mount's scoring record. Those were records that stood for 40 and 50 years. Mm-hmm. Braden Smith breaks an assist record that stood for almost 50 years. Like, it's just you don't see that very often. Like, I think the fact that we've had 3 records broken in the last 2 years speaks to the job that Matt Painter's done, but then also just the incredible amount of talent that's been at West Lafayette. So it truly is. I mean, I know people would have liked to win a Big Ten title. We still got March. We'll see what happens with Purdue in the NCAA tournament and what kind of run they can make. But you've now seen Purdue see, 3 records broken. You've seen them get 2 Big Ten regular season titles, a Big Ten tournament title, and get to the national championship game in the last 3 years. Like, this is, in my opinion, this is the golden era of Purdue basketball. So don't take it for granted.
That's a hell of a run. Yeah, when you lay it all out there like that, you list it just bullet point. That's a heck of a run. Let's talk about that a little bit this year. So a couple Big Ten titles. They were picked to win the Big Ten again this year. We've talked about that on every episode. They were pacing the pack for a while. Then Michigan State, and Illinois, Wisconsin were kind of all in the mix, like battling back and forth. And now Purdue has slipped back a little bit, and they are officially eliminated from winning the Big Ten. I mean, look, only one, or I guess it could end up being maybe Michigan State split it at this point. There is a possibility of that. Everybody's down to, I think, 2 games left. Purdue has Rutgers at home and then at Illinois. Ironically, as a Michigan fan, those are the last 2 opponents I watched Michigan play against. It took a buzzer beater for the Wolverines to beat Rutgers, and then they just got absolutely thumped by Illinois in Ann Arbor yesterday. So we'll get to that in a moment. But with Purdue being mathematically eliminated, does that feel like a bummer? I mean, does it feel like this team's underperforming, or they got cold at a terrible time? Like, I mean, look, man, they're still going to be one of the teams that no one wants to see in the tournament when that comes around. But I think, like you said, given the recent run and the fact that they were picked to win it again, is it technically a disappointment? I mean, just how's the vibe right now, knowing that they cannot win the regular season Big Ten title?
I think if you asked the players, and Fletcher and I think Braden both kind of hinted at this in, media availability, like, yeah, it sucks. Like, we wanted to win the Big Ten. We wanted to three-peat. So I think the vibe in that locker room is disappointment, but at the same time, they can't dwell on it. There's like, hey, we got a chance to still, do some good things in the Big Ten tournament. We have a chance to make a run in the NCAA tournament. We'd like to get back to the Final Four. So, and I think from a fan perspective, I feel like, and maybe this is, I don't know, maybe this is just me kind of reading social media. I think it's more disappointing in the moment. Mm-hmm. And that is when you are in first place and then you drop 4 straight, like you're just trying to stop the bleeding. So it's you were in control of your destiny. You had this 4-game stretch, and you feel like, when they were, 11-2, I think, in Big Ten play, mm-hmm. and you see that game stretch, if we can go 2-2, and we really like our chances of winning the Big Ten, because that puts them at 4 losses. Michigan State's at 3, so at least you're in contention heading into this final week. But I think now it's like, yeah, we didn't win the Big Ten, but let's just make sure we get things back on track. And I think the UCLA game was a good first step in that direction. So I don't know. It's really hard to win the Big Ten in consecutive mm-hmm. years. You had a stretch where you just weren't playing. And really, Brandon, it to me, it came down to you played those 4 teams. You didn't get a lot of rest in between those games, and you play them consecutively. Like, how does that look if you play Michigan State when you were back in January? Mm-hmm. If you play Wisconsin at the end, at the end of the season, if you move those games around, how does it look? Does Purdue maybe fare a little bit better? But they really had no breathing room during that stretch. So you'd like to think that they could weather that storm a little bit better with as much experience as they had. But I also think that, again, from the fan perspective, you're saying, you know what, if they were going to hit a lull and have like this mental block we're happy it happened at the end of January and early February, as opposed to, or actually just was all February, but in the middle of February as opposed to March.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But I think the NCAA tournament is going to dictate a lot of how people feel. If this is a team that gets beat in one of the first 2 rounds, I think people are going to be very disappointed with how it turned out. If they're able to get to the Sweet 16, yeah, you would have liked to win a Big Ten tournament, but second weekend of the NCAA tournament is about what a lot of people thought this team would do.
Winning makes a lot of things go away. There's no doubt about it. And, March is always incredible, and Purdue's had, like you said, a lot of success there in recent years as well. Yeah, if they make it through the first weekend and they're getting ready for Sweet 16 play, nobody's going to care that much about that little 4-game skid and what that ultimately meant for the regular season. But you do have Michigan State at the top of the conference by themselves right now, 15-3. Michigan right there, 14-4, and they play to close out the regular season. It might be for a share of the Big Ten title if Michigan can win that game. It's in East Lansing. That's tough. Then you've got Maryland, Purdue, and Wisconsin all at 12-6. So, it's a very good in Michigan. Michigan still has to play Maryland, and then they've got a stretch here, and Purdue does kind of as well. I mean, you look at Rutgers; it's kind of a weird team. We talked about them earlier in the season as well. They've got 2 likely top 5 draft picks on that team in Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, and they lose games that you're just like, how did they lose that game? And like Michigan. Like I said, they needed a 35-foot buzzer beater 3 to beat the Scarlet Knights, and that was at home as well for the Wolverines. So they're not a team that you can sleep on. Purdue takes them on. I think it's at home tomorrow, right? Tomorrow night in Mackey.
Yeah.
What are the thoughts on that one? I mean, you certainly can't sleepwalk through it. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey provide some matchup problems. That they're big, they're athletic, they obviously have next level skill. Thoughts on Rutgers and what Purdue needs to do to keep the wins stacking up here?
Yeah, there's been in recent years, Rutgers they don't always beat Purdue, but they seem to always give Purdue fits and challenges. And I know Purdue, like earlier this season, Purdue went up there, won by 18 points, were able to force Rutgers into 16 turnovers. I think Rutgers shot like 32% from the floor, so Purdue was really locked in and engaged defensively. Now, the one caveat, the one caveat I'd give you there was that was when Dylan Harper was kind of going through that weird like illness where he was in and out of a few games here and there, so he wasn't at full strength. So this is going to be a different look, what we see Tuesday night. Now, I still think Purdue's the better team. I think they have better depth than Rutgers. But if Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper get cooking, I mean, those guys, like, that's the thing. That's the thing about this Rutgers team, right? Like, if they were to get hot, they can beat just about anybody. It's just they don't have a lot of bodies, and so they wear down easily, and it's hard to win games when you just have really just 2 guys that are contributing, right? So it's going to be interesting because Dylan Harper wasn't at full strength. So they're going to have to account for that. Like, it's going to be a little bit different. And then I want to see too, Purdue did a really good job early in that UCLA game. And this is what they did when they won 11 games in that 12-game stretch, was they were forcing teams into turnovers. And through the first 7 or 8 minutes, I think they forced UCLA into 9. And then over the next 10 or 15 minutes of the game, they only forced 3. So I want to see if Purdue can force Rutgers into turnovers again, because if they're able to do that, then I think that this could be a lopsided win. But if they have those issues where during that 4-game losing streak, they only forced Michigan into 11 turnovers, that was the only time they forced a double-digit turnover in against one of those 4 teams, you might allow Rutgers to hang around, and Purdue's all too familiar. Like, that Ron Harper Jr. half-court shot when Purdue was ranked number 1. Cam Spencer hit a big 3 to beat Purdue at Mackey a few years ago. So Rutgers, that's the one thing. Like, Purdue's toughness is going to be tested here. That's what Rutgers tends to do. Like, they like to take you into a phone booth, right, and beat you up a little bit. And that's how they've had success against Purdue. So we'll see. I think that this is – this is going to be a really stupid comment, Brandon, but I feel like I'm going to make it anyway.
I love these.
Like it's going to be like, I feel like either Purdue's going to set the tone early and this is going to be a 25-point win for the Boilers, or it's going to be really close. Well, it's like, how else is it going to go? But I don't feel like it's going to be one of those 8 to 10-point games where it's just like, you know what I mean? Where it's like Purdue's, they never able to put them away, but you feel pretty comfortable. So I just think this is going to be one of those grinded out games, or Purdue's just going to, from the opening jump, set the tone early, and Rutgers is just never going to have a shot at this.
I don't think that's that dumb. Like, there's a lot of stuff between a blowout win and a grinded out, back and forth, maybe nail biter. I mean, I think there's a lot of listen. I compared my game to Braden Smith's earlier today. Okay, like we're fine with the stupid.
You know what? Fair.
We're good. We're good on that. All right, let's skip a little bit ahead. It is Friday, but it'll be the last game of the season. We won't talk again until this one's over. So a little bit on Illinois at Illinois. And look, man, I don't know what got into them, but they couldn't miss yesterday against Michigan. They were knocking down threes at an incredible clip. I saw a stat and I was like, yeah, maybe they should change up what they do. They attempt the 5th most threes in the country. And they knocked them down at number, I think they were 331st in the country in percent. I'm like, look, if you're 331st in anything, you should stop doing that. But they didn't. They just bombed away at threes against Michigan and knocked down a whole bunch of them, ended up winning by 20 in Ann Arbor when Michigan had only lost 1 game at home all season. So I would say that game at Illinois is certainly not a gimme. And so just a quick thought on the Illini. Like I said, it's on Friday, so a handful of days away here still. But, thoughts on the regular season finale.
Yeah, usually in these type of situations, what Purdue likes to do is force those poor shooting teams into threes. Like, pack the paint, don't let them drive. And if they're going to beat us by the 3-point shot, then so be it. Like, that's one of the things that Painter harped on after that Indiana game. Like, let them shoot the 3 ball, and Purdue was running them off the 3-point line, and that's how they were able to get easy buckets, right? And so to me, my guess is going to be that's going to be the strategy, but Illinois is a bit of a microwave, right? Like, if they can start knocking shots in, they can heat up really quickly, and you can have a result like you had. But if they're missing, you could see a reincarnation of that Duke game where they got beat 110-60 or whatever the final score ended up being, right? Like, it's hot or cold with that team. So it's almost like I don't even know how to break that game down, because I feel like so much of it is depending on if Illinois is going to hit shots or not. Like, there's other teams that you just go into the game. Okay, Wisconsin's probably going to get a lot of shots. Michigan State's a poor 3-point shooting team. They're going to attack the rim. They're going to go for lobs. They're going to get, good shot selection. But Illinois, it seems like they don't care. They're just going to fire up those threes. So it's almost more dependent on what Illinois does. But I would say from the offensive perspective, if Illinois is knocking down those shots, Purdue's got to get good quality shots, try to force them into turnovers, get into transition, steal extra possessions, because I think that's going to be the best way to win that game, is if you can create extra possessions and kind of take them out of a rhythm, then I think Purdue's going to have a shot. But that, especially with that game being at home at Illinois, I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup.
I was just checking a couple things out here too. They knocked down 14 threes against Michigan. Michigan only hit 4. That's a big discrepancy there. 4 of 5 starters scored at least 13 points for the Illini, and they scored 93 points total. I mean, they were filling it up against the Wolverines, and again, at home, you never know. I mean, and it's the finale, and they're also off till then. They don't play again until they play Purdue on Friday. They have 5-6 days of rest in between games here to close out the season for Illinois, and they've, like you said, they've looked good at times, and then I believe that was the worst loss in program history, if I remember correctly, to Duke, which is crazy to me.
Oh,
I think I heard that. That's what if that was the correct score, then that's almost 50. I mean, yeah, that's a 43-point loss. That doesn't happen very often, too.
That's got to be up there, yeah.
A Power 4, Power 5 team. So there you go. All right. So Purdue closes it out with a game tomorrow against Rutgers at home, and then at Illinois on Friday. And we will talk to Dustin again next Monday what will we know on Monday? We'll know the seedings for the Big Ten tournament, and the Big Ten tournament will start on is it Tuesday or Wednesday?
Wednesday.
And a little bit of weirdness this year with the 18 teams, and not even everybody gets in, which is kind of weird to me. But what it is. Purdue will be in, so we will find out who they play.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that on Monday morning. Dustin, thanks so much for the time, man.
Thanks, Brandon.